Hey, you blink, I'll cut your eyelids off. Don't you blink.
I got you.
Let's go.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition here of the Men of Steel podcast, where, of course, yours truly, Charles Prodigy Richey, getting ready to kick off right here once again. Returning here this week on Facebook Live right now. We'll not be doing Instagram Live tonight, but getting ready to kick back up as what's been the hot button topic throughout the week, ever since David DeCastro being released right now, even for not reporting an injury, more than likely. Her one guy, senior NFL writer and contributor from ESPN Seattle, John Clayton, he was on 93.7 The Fan earlier today talking about possible punishment the Steelers may have to follow right now. Will this not reporting to David DeCastro his ankle injury right now, will that be something where they'll have to pay the piper in the form of a draft pick or yet alone a fine going into this? And plus, we have some news to start off here on this very first segment here. Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, he reported on there how one offensive lineman, we'll get to him in just a second, some of the coaches are not happy with the shape he is coming into. We'll hit on him in just a moment. And then also, who are the other guys, according to Dejan Kovacevic, that need to step up going into this year on the offensive line right now? Is it's pretty much a new wave for the time being as we look at it. And what we shall see. I mean, will this lead to any more success? I mean, how much more is it going to be run pass team first, then some passes opening up here? And you remember the main theme coming out of Art Rooney's closing press conference. They need to run the ball. They need to run it well and get any terms of success for the most part. But I will say this, for the most part right now, they need to reestablish things back in the running game, and they cannot do anything to go back, revert to their old ways where they're becoming too predictable. I think that's the biggest thing we need to focus on right here. Will they be coming to a point, I mean, and see right now with the red tape being lifted off right now? I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, of course, I mean, you heard it through Ed Bichette, too, who was talking to Ron Cook and paying attention. You look at the game plan last year. I mean, the name of the game for Ben Roethlisberger that was drawn out was to get the ball out of his hands quicker. And maybe getting rid of the ball quicker, I mean, just to avoid pressure to not only get hit, but just put pressure on throwing too many deep balls. I mean, and doing a lot of these short passing games. I know, I mean, when we heard a guy like Kevin Colbert, who even said when Ben Roethlisberger was able to first throw like a simple thing like a tennis ball before he progressed into a football back in February of 2020, right before the time the pandemic started the spiral. I mean, he insisted that they felt like they had a new and improved, better quarterback. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger. And I feel right now when we look at it, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, listen, I think right now, as we take a look at it, I think for right now, the look at it is this. I mean, they definitely needed a wake-up call, and they need to be more creative and definitely need to change things in a heartbeat. I think, if anything, for right now, I mean, when we truly look at this, it has been it has been a remarkable progression over late. I mean, make no mistake about it, when we look at this offensive line, I mean, but still, I mean, you also have to think that Ben Roethlisberger coincides with success once again. Because outside the offensive line, I mean, right now, I mean, the priorities when we look at this offseason, where would you rank the concerns going into, like, this season, yet alone in the training camp? Obviously, offensive line battle, I think it's definitely going to be the top of the heap right there. But what would you say will come next? Would it necessarily be the running game with Najee Harris? I mean, he's been getting some good positive feedback so far. I mean, even from a guy like Max Starks and a few others who watched him from afar. Mika Fitzpatrick seems to like the competitiveness that he's bringing right now, where he feels like he could overcome anything. But for the most part, I think if anything, I mean, outside of it, would have to be the quarterback battle. I'd probably say if I'm looking at it right now, the two leading storylines, obviously the offensive line, followed by it would have to be after the offensive line, it would have to be the focus on the quarterback position. Because there's even a fair point, too, that was mentioned in an article by Bleacher Report. I mean, if the Steelers should try and consider trading Mason Rudolph. I mean, for this season. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But, I mean, that was written by Brad Gagnon, who feels Steelers need to give Dwayne Haskins a clear path to gain the legit runner-up to Ben Roethlisberger and to be the successor once he retires. Obviously, Mike Tomlin has been having a lot of high hopes for him. I mean, in terms of the success. But I definitely do feel like right now there's been such a huge optimism around him. Just, I mean, him being away from Washington. I mean, with him being waived. And then for the Steelers to pick him up. A first-round draft pick on this roster right here. And if anything, it's right now, it is right now a real legit issue they had to attend with at the end of the day. I just feel right now when you look at the situation at hand, I think for right now, I mean, it just goes to show you right now, the elephant in the room, outside the offensive line, it does come down to Ben Roethlisberger. And yes, I mean, a couple of years ago, you had the defense, was able to carry them, making a game-changing trade. But look at it. I mean, for the most part, Mike Tomlin kept this team competitive. And when you look at a reason why he is a 10th ranked coach, according to CBS Sports, going into the season, I can't really have too much of an issue with that. I think that was just definitely a little bit way too high. I mean, when we review the list once again here, on the top coaches going into 2021, now, remember, they did say they're not basing it on career resumes, but they are looking at the fact, too, how they could carry things over into the following season. I mean, of course, you got the guys ahead of Mike Tomlin. Let's start from the head. Number one was Andy Reid. I mean, no argument there. I mean, he's ahead of Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is still at number two. Now, as great as a coach as he is, I think a lot of people are still wanting to give this guy the benefit of the doubt that he could still right things with the Patriots. I mean, this is year number two. I mean, without Brady, life without Brady. Still got Cam Newton on there. And you got Mac Jones drafted in the first round. And more than likely, I mean, is he going to be the guy that's successor to Tom Brady? I mean, a guy who's now is mobile, but a guy who has a decent enough presence in the pocket, do some legitimate passing. And we'll see. And then after that, like I said, you got John Harbaugh of the Ravens, number three. Sean Payton at number 4 of the Saints. Sean McDermott of the Bills at 5. Sean McVay of the Rams at 6. Pete Carroll at 7 for the Seahawks. Bruce Arians of the defending Super Bowl champions, with Tom Brady at number 8. Matt LaFleur of the Packers, and Mike Tomlin. And I don't know. I think a lot of it, too, where you're looking at these guys ahead of Mike Tomlin for the simple fact. I mean, when you look at these guys on this list, I think they're looking more at the fact they're able to adjust with the quarterback play, in particularly. And maybe that's a strike against Mike Tomlin. I mean, yeah, you had Mason Rudolph in there. I mean, who, by the way, I mean, in his professional career, I mean, when he was able to come in and start for the Steelers back in 2019, obviously he didn't show a whole lot of encouragement. He did show some flashes of what he was coming out of Oklahoma State University. I mean, when you truly look at him and think about what's been happening here, I mean, for the most part, I mean, he has a 5-3 record in his starts. I mean, when trying to fill in for Ben Roethlisberger, the last victory he got, unfortunately, he did not finish the game, but Devin Hodges came off the bench, helped guide the Steelers to a victory. So, I mean, he finishes his record 5-3. I mean, you could argue his last legitimate win was against the LA Rams back, I mean, in 2019. And for the most part, I mean, that was right there against the Rams. That was their 9th game of the year. They won that game 17-12. I mean, in that contest against the Rams, he completed about 58% of his passes, 242 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. So, I mean, yes, you had defense right there, but the thing I think where people are a little bit concerned with Mike Tomlin is how you've been finishing your seasons as of late. Remember, he was 7-2-1 in 2018. I had the division and the playoffs at hand. Finishes down the stretch 2-4, 9-6-1 record out of the playoffs. Courtesy of the Ravens winning the AFC North division. That was the ticket to be into the playoffs. Then 2 years ago, 8-5, 3 games left to go, 0-3. And yes, he had a gas defense. And pretty much the magic of Duck Hodges ran out at that point. But they could have just won 2 out of their 3 games with some help. They will have been in the playoffs as a wild card. And then you go flashback to this year, 11-0 start, finishing 1-4 in the season. So, I mean, if you're truly, I mean, doing the math right there and keeping score, I mean, for the most part, I mean, when you really look at it, I mean, right there, I mean, for that part, 3-11 in the last 3 years, whenever this team had control of their own destiny, finishing off the regular season, and not making late possible adjustments. Despite the fact that people will continue to say that Mike Tomlin, he has a great record where he has never had a loss in his coaching career. True. But at the same time, too, and I mean, listen, it's a very, very, very rare and elite class to be in where you started this many years without never having a losing record in your career. I just feel, I mean, since you've been in your Super Bowl, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of coaches, I mean, right there, I mean, who's not had many success. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, the guy has been to 2 Super Bowl teams, no matter who the players he carried over from Cowher's team or some of the players he helped add in alongside Kevin Colbert working together. The bottom line is he did his part. He did his part. He kept them relevant. I mean, did enough to motivate them and make some changes as time went along to be championship Super Bowl relevancy. And this is where I look at it right now. I just feel, I mean, Tomlin, I'm just not so sure. I think the patience right now for me is getting a little concerning. I don't want this guy fired at all. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I do think could possibly happen, I mean, despite giving a very, generous extension when we looked at it, a 3-year contract extension, usually like 1 to 2 years. I mean, at least, for at least the 2024 season. So basically, starting this year, at least 4 more years of Mike Tomlin. I think if anything, he's got. I mean, this is it. I mean, more than likely. I think his fate is going to be how they game plan for life beyond Ben Roethlisberger, the shape of this new offensive line. Can you keep the defense similar to what you had? Because off this coaching list, once again, for anyone who missed the Men of Steel podcast on Monday night, if I am looking at this list of the top 10 coaches right now, like I said, if I were to put Mike Tomlin anywhere, I'd definitely swap him out with Sean McVay. I think if anything, or even Sean McDermott. I mean, I put Mike Tomlin at least number 5 or number 6. I'll put him at 5. Sean McDermott of the Bills. Yes, you got Josh Allen. Still got a very respectable defense. I mean, number 2 in total offense and points scored. 14th in total defense. 16th in points defense. And yes, I mean, they did finally snap. I mean, what was it? Like a 25-year drought of not having a playoff win? 24, 25 years? 24 years, excuse me. I mean, a quarter century, basically. But and they came up as far as they can. I mean, having to go for the wild card round. I mean, the very first year where it was a 17-game format, only the top seed getting the bye. But I mean, took care of business against the Colts, which they held on to. Pretty much dominated the Ravens and some pretty wild playing conditions, windy conditions. Were able to take care of Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And I mean, had a good start to the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, but started the down spiral as the game went along. So I think Tomlin, for the most part, I don't care what you got with Josh Allen and who you got outside of there. I think, if anything, he's more respectable than Sean McDermott. Mike Tomlin has at least got a ring than any of these guys on here. And I would even definitely put at least Pete Carroll. I mean, I'd swap him with definitely, like Sean McVay. I mean, he needs to go ahead of Sean McVay. I realize the Seahawks did lose to Rams in the first round. I mean, Sean McVay is one of my other favorite coaches, too, in this league. Who's a nice young stallion. Another guy who hasn't had a losing record as of yet. A guy who could be creative and just be one of the guys as a coach. If anything, Carroll deserves to be ahead of Sean McVay for right now. We're going to find out this year, how that marriage with him and Matthew Stafford is going to pair up. So, let's find out what what's happened here. You guys want to hit me up on Twitter, you can definitely follow me on Twitter at MassSteelCGR and on Instagram at MassSteel Nation right now. Basically. So the state of the offensive line right now, I mean, like I said, aside from David DeCastro, hopefully the Steelers, it's nothing they'll have to get fined for or get cost of a draft pick. Despite not showing up in the injury report, how much hot water will they be in from keeping this disclosed? I tend to think maybe, just maybe, it'll just be a fine at the most. I'm not sure if it's going to cost them a draft pick. I don't see them as being as repeat offenders. I mean, then again, I think they did do that with Ben Roethlisberger. A couple of years ago. Trying to find out right now. They fined the Steelers $750,000, and this was back on November 1st. $75,000. Excuse me, for violating its injury report policy after Ben Roethlisberger suffered an elbow injury, according to Ian Rappaport and Todd Pelissero of NFL Network. Mike Tomlin also got a $25,000 fine. And they said their violation was for not accurately listing the quarterback on the Week 2 injury report prior to their home opener versus Seattle Seahawks. So they're not costing a draft pick, thankfully. But that's the thing. I think, if anything, I think the Steelers right now, for the most part, I think I would hope that's not the case. I don't see him being that out of control with it. I mean, one could argue, looking at it, it seems to be a little bit of a repeat offender in this scenario. For the time being, but only time will tell. I'm just going to say it'll just be a fine. I doubt it's going to be a special draft picks. Steelers always have a good relationship with the league, and we'll find out. And here are some of the guys that Dejan Kovacevic listed, and right here that he was talking about, and more with Kevin Dotson. He said that he appears to be in the shape of a professional wrestler, which is pretty much how he was listed as pro day back in 2020. 6'4", 310 pounds. One of the biggest things that was more noticeable, perhaps, was his muscle mass. The offensive line coach Adrian Clem and the offensive coordinator Matt Canada, they want to run more of a wide zone offense. And I guess one of the arguments from Dejan's point of view was that they wanted him to cut some of that weight. So maybe after interpreting, because he did post on his trainer or his partner right now. When we look at it, offensive line scouting and development expert Duke Manyweather posted videos of Kevin Dotson working out from February for April. If you guys want to check out the video, feel free. But he was definitely pulling some weights, working out in the gym. So I see no issues over there. Again, maybe it's just the fact that he's just got too much size on him versus less weight. And I guess in their minds, he didn't look like a guy who was taking his shape serious enough when their season ended back in January in the playoffs. So maybe they're looking for someone to be more quicker. But then again, if he is more muscular, I have no issues with that. I just feel right now, at the end of the day, this line has definitely got some questions. They got to figure out a way to open up holes. My only concern, like I continue to mention right now, is opening up. Protecting Ben Roethlisberger more. Yeah, he's been the least sacked quarterback in the league last year, only getting sacked 10 times. But outside of Dotson right there, here's some of the other guys he listed, basically. I mean, Zach Banner right now. Love the guy's effort. Love the guy's heart. I mean, Zach Banner, who is signed an extension, I mean, with the Steelers, I mean, this offseason. And you look at some of the stuff, I mean, he was doing right now. I mean, Zach Banner, who signed a 2-year contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers on March 16th for about $9 7.75 million with $3.25 million guaranteed. This is a guy right now who, who's coming off a surgically repaired knee. He was out the first game versus the Giants. And I know the Steelers, they more likely signed him. Probably they felt a lot more pressure to make sure they got someone around for the long run. But listen, Zach Banner has not really proven to me anything just yet. I mean, obviously the Steelers have enough faith in him. He's did enough where he's able to hang around and be a part of this new breed of the offensive line. That they need to have like a key. I mean, they must still view him as a cornerstone piece. I mean, from the way I look at it. Because, I mean, either way, I mean, it's like, I mean, who else are you going to really find outside of him? I mean, the offensive line, I mean, for the most part, I mean, when you take a look at it too, I mean, he may have to be forced to lead the group according to Dejan's mind. He was a non-participant member, just to recap, in OTAs, and he's not shy about speaking his mind at all. Tukes Corfor, Dejan also mentions, too, they need to make a seamless transition from right to left tackle. And he's one of the guys who hardly talks, has a little bit of seriousness, but he says he feels like he'll need to break that shell as needed. And he's going to be going into his 4th season as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Got more experience in that. And you look at a guy like, Chukwuma Okorafor, who was selected in the 3rd round of the 2018 NFL Draft, 92nd overall. Honestly, when I heard him get drafted, I had a lot of big, high hope for this guy. To slot right in there. And, I mean, for the most part, I definitely feel like Banner was a guy who definitely pushed him as time went on. I mean, in the off-field, I mean, in the training camp workouts. So, and then you also look at another guy right now, B.J. Finney. Right now, Dejan feels like he needs to press Dotson harder than anyone else, meaning through his camp performance. And from a lot of things that he's hearing, he might have to do so as a favor to start at left guard. He says he will be okay with that. He feels that he's a solid football player and he's gritty as it gets on the offensive line. Now, Kendra Green right now, I mean, a guy who got drafted technically as a guard but could play center, coming out of Champaign, Fighting Illini, Illinois. This is a guy right here. I mean, can we really trust that B.J. Finney will be able to pick up on the offensive line, be able to keep things secure? But other than that, I don't think he was that bad of a lineman who needed to fill in when needed. I mean, the communication is going to be freaking huge for Ben. When you're going with someone on our side to help you call out plays or blocking assignments, you want to make sure that's your stable guy. So that's what we have in the offensive line. I feel like the running game will be improved, mainly because we'll see how much of that it factor will Najee Harris prove to be. That's what I'm looking at right here as we continue to move along here on this edition of the Man of Steel podcast. Also, too, in training camp, Mark Cabali of The Athletic reporting, aside from the Steelers being denied to go to training camp, Panthers are holding joint sessions with the Ravens. On May 26th, NFL owners agreed to allow 90-man rosters to enter training camp 2021. They will first be cut down to 85 players on August 17th, a second to 80 on August 24th, and the final trip to the three-man roster on August 31st. And I think right now, like I said, listen, I think the stuff that's been going on in LaTrobe, still a head scratcher if you ask me, how they're not able to host it there with fans just yet. The only thing is, too, when you look at, some of the things out there, too, with training camp, what is really going to be expected right now, once again, at Heinz Field, UPMC Sports Building Complex? Players trying to find a way to practice with more full speed. It seems likely that the Steelers, right now, it was unlikely that teams will come out with an empty injury report. Unlikely. But under a collective bargaining agreement, the first 3 days of training camp must contain no contact. Fourth and fifth days, players are permitted to go to speed and helmets and light practice gear called sputters and shells. The sixth day is a mandatory day off, and when the seventh is when players will wheel pads for the first time in the off season. And I just feel right now, a lot of people look at it right now as a sign that what are they not doing right? How are they missing out? And why do they get to be denied? I think it's definitely hugely unfair. At the same time, I can understand why there's a little bit more to it. So, let's take a look at this a little bit harder too. Let's also get into this right now. I want to ask you real quick as we look at it. Big Ben Roethlisberger, his career. How should we remember Ben Roethlisberger? A guy who was given, 17 seasons in Pittsburgh so far, going into his 18th season. It's definitely incredible to think what he's been able to do. Truly only playing 16 seasons. Realistically. Full seasons. But where does he rank at the end of the day amongst Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And once again, I know we get into this conversation a lot every now and then, but Ben Roethlisberger, is his career right now going to be defined as the one of the all-time great Steelers? And where is this place in NFL quarterback history, especially with his recent draft class of guys like Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers? I feel like Ben Roethlisberger, at the end of the day, listen, I mean, this is a quarterback, I mean, Steelers been needing to have, obviously, since Bradshaw, which took them about 2 decades. I mean, and everything that he's meant to this club here. I mean, when you think of like all the years that the Steelers were defensively leading the way, I mean, post Bradshaw, even when Chuck Noll was coaching him, even to the transition of Bill Cowher, but the quarterback was like seemed to be the missing piece for quite a long time. I think if anything, when you think about this guy right here, I mean, a guy who has 156 wins in his regular season. I mean, 169 career wins, 83 losses, 1 tie. I mean, he's got 13 playoff wins, 9 losses, ranks 6th among playoff winning quarterbacks. Now you can say what you will. I mean, Corey. I mean, especially with the last couple of years, right there. I mean, since the end of the Killer Bee era, what has he really done since his last 2 Super Bowl appearances? I mean, him and Mike Tom will definitely be tied to the hip for a long time. But Ben Roethlisberger, in my opinion, his career, I think if anything, he has been a ginormous big game quarterback. I mean, more great regular season. I'll say at least, I mean, in fairness, when I evaluate things, I'll say definitely 60% regular. I mean, in regular season, 40% in the playoffs. I mean, the guy has definitely grown up and matured and one of the all-time greats. And he has been a guy that reminds you when he is injured, it's not that easy to go on life without him. Obviously, 2 years ago, I mean, without him, I mean, like I said, defense was clicking on all cylinders for the most part. I mean, they were carrying this team. I'm not so sure if he were to get hurt again this season. I mean, will the team suffer without him? I mean, I think it's one of the only things too about Ben Roethlisberger. I think the biggest thing that continues to lack, that goes against him at times, is his total leadership. I mean, around like the locker room, in the media, I felt like he's been a stand-up guy. Outside of that, I mean, he's definitely had a lot of like maturing, even when they were winning those first 2 Super Bowls and those first 3 they were together. But Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, I mean, listen, I think it's anything. He's definitely shown me more the last 2 years. I mean, he's been there more closer with his teammates. I mean, outside of guys like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, since they moved on, since they had to part ways. I mean, he has ingratiated himself more so being there, where it's communicating with them, standing on the sidelines with each other. Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, he has a heart that still pumps and motivation to like still want to lead this team to championship caliber. Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, when we truly look at it, I think, if anything, how he does having the first full year of rest on his elbow surgery. I mean, from recovering from his elbow, and what he could do with the weapons. I mean, will Najee Harris be enough to help relieve him some of those the passing on his arm, and just be more creative, a lot more continuity? You got a guy like Matt Canada who seems to feel that maybe more trusted and input from Ben Roethlisberger be the way things will make it more rosier path. I'm not so sure about that. I think if anything, Ben Roethlisberger will do is this. Uh, I think he'll definitely be a lot more rested. But I think for right now, I think the biggest question right now is like who's going to go to more outside the running game? Is he going to continue that continuity with him and Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, then Chase Claypool? Because the only thing is with Ben Roethlisberger, when I look at a guy, when he's locked in, he's locked in. But to be honest with you, too, listen, I think the only concern I have, too, like late in the season when you got your playoffs wrapped up, when they're, I mean, able to clinch as early as they did, I still think at times I'm not so sure if I want to necessarily rest for that final week of the regular season totally. At least still give me a few more reps. I think that's been my only takeaway I see with Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he'll get rested, get ready for the playoffs. And when you truly, I mean, look at that. When he's had that luxury in such a long time, I mean, really, I feel right now, I mean, what he needs to do, I mean, the most part, I mean, when he is in that situation, he finds himself in. I mean, for the most part, I think he was successful. I mean, with it, I mean, was back in 2016. I mean, he's been 1-2 so far. I mean, one resting for the regular season and going into the, or excuse me. Look at games where his team is rested and going into the playoffs. I mean, for the most part. He's been 3-2 in his career whenever he sat out the regular last game of the regular season and going into the playoffs. So where I think is Ben Roethlisberger as far as like big game performers, I think he's definitely number one on the Steelers all time in their quarterback history. I think if anything, I mean, when it comes to bigger games, I think I'd have to go with still Terry Bradshaw at the end of the day. Bradshaw was still remarkable in playoff games, throwing some big numbers. I mean, and not only that too. I mean, Terry Bradshaw has been the only quarterback to win Super Bowl MVP twice And he's our only league MVP in history. And he did this at a time, more particularly too, when rules changed, in favor of the Mel Blunt rule. And where receivers were needing a little bit more room right there, and where the line or the defender was only able to tug one time, if it's anything beyond like 5 yards contact, illegal touching basically. So he was a guy who struggled for a majority of his career, and just to be able to all of a sudden, once you start picking up the offense from Chuck Noll, was able to go into his own and get more confident and just let it rip. I'm still sticking with Ben. Ride with him to the day at the end. And I think Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, right now, I definitely would say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I just don't see why he wouldn't be. When you look at a guy right now who's fifth in career wins ranked, fifth in win-loss percentage. And then what he's been able to do. He's also one of the quarterbacks who was in the 60,000 yard passing. Just the way he's been able to stay around too. Ben Roethlisberger has been a guy. Yes, he's been injured at times, but it's not. Just his availability overall. I definitely put him over. I put him first, then Eli Manning, then Phillip Rivers as far as his draft class. So let's go ahead. So for Ben Roethlisberger, I'm just gonna say a guy who could just endure. At the end of the day, when you look at his career, when it's all said and done, a guy who could take on so much punishment, was able to make plays. It was able to extend plays, but wasn't afraid to lay it all on the line when his team needed him the most. And developed into a leader late in his career. That'll be the legacy of Ben Roethlisberger in my book, aside from the 2 Super Bowls. When you look at the qualities. Now let's go on fair or foul right now. Should the Steelers consider trading Mason Rudolph at this point? Like I mentioned, Bleacher Report's Brad Gagnon feels the Steelers need to give Dwayne Haskins a clear shot at being the team successor once Ben Roethlisberger is ready to hang it up. Listen, Dwayne Haskins right now, he's got a lot of great support. You almost tend to think, despite Mason Rudolph signing 1-year extension, it doesn't feel like it's too much support. For him, obviously he's got enough. For one more year, they want to keep him around and see what happens. But question is, too, how do we know if Ben Roethlisberger is definitely going to retire after this year? He's going to be turning 40 next year. But if you look at, what they could do, creatively, him and Matt Canada, Adrian Clem working together in this offense, can they be able to restore a little bit of a spark right now? Even if they come short in the championship. I could see Ben Roethlisberger playing one more year at 40, but I don't know if I want to keep pushing it at this point. But at the same time, too, listen, if you still got a clear, legitimate answer in what you have in Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, why go necessarily? There's many who've been making the argument he's going to be holding this franchise back for a few years by playing the round that he's playing. I'm not so sure. I think if anything, listen, this is a team who wants to continue to win, still sees themselves as big-time players in championships. Cannot take that away from him. So I would definitely listen, where could Mason Rudolph go that he could probably be an interesting piece right now? I mean, who would you, trade with? I wouldn't mind if he goes in the AFC. I don't think he's that much of a threat where he could go another team and be starting quarterback material just yet. But I would look at teams maybe like the Chicago Bears probably one. I know I realize they got Nick Foles, but him and his relationship with the Bears is kind of like a funky situation at the same time. I'm not so sure how long that's going to continue to last. Would he do well serving somewhere as a backup to a guy like Kirk Cousins and the Vikings? Our situation right there, or the Lions. Other teams you could also probably look at too. Maybe the Cowboys. Dak Prescott, he's got his money, but still, just somewhere where he could just just be a nice fill-in piece, still be able to help someone out when needed. Maybe the Washington football team. I would definitely like the Washington football team for a Mason Rudolph. Now that they're going to be without Alex Smith. Alex Smith, he was done since he had his leg broken. And for what the pain he's had to play through and how they work together, running the ball and offensive line protection, I could see him being a good fit with Ron Rivera and his staff. So let's wait and see. I'm not sure how much the value high is going to be on him. Maybe a few late round picks. I'd like to hear from you on that. And that's all. So, for right now, I'm going to have to say fair. I wouldn't necessarily say foul this, only because when you're getting your roster together, they have 4 quarterbacks on this depth chart. Remember, with Mason, outside Ben Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, of course, you got Dwayne Haskins and Joshua Dobbs. Maybe Joshua Dobbs would just be the odd man out once again. Because I don't see any. Why is he sticking around even? Because if they are to trade Mason Rudolph, because remember, Mason Rudolph, he signed a 1-year extension for $6 million, $2.08 million guaranteed via sign bonus. Should they trade Mason Rudolph, they'll be saving $920,000 with a $1.273066 million cap hit and dead money. And last but not least, will the Steelers, according to John Clayton, give some sort of penalty for not reporting David Castro? Absolutely. I think this will be a fine. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough where it's going to warrant costing them a draft pick, but that's about it. So that's going to do it for this edition here of the Man of Steel podcast. So, of course, yours truly, Charles Prodigy Richey. Once again, you guys can follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter at Man of Steel CJR and on Instagram at Man of Steel Nation. So I was leaving. They'll be trolling, be rolling. I gone.